Roy from Roy's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on a 2000 Subaru Forester 2.5 liter automatic. I'm going to show you how to replace the inner and outer tie rods and the bellows boot. These are the tools I'm going to be using today to do this job. Pry bar, rubber mallet, a ball peen hammer, 4-pound sledgehammer, 1/2-inch drive flex ratchet, 1/2-inch drive extension, my tool to remove and install the inner tie rod, 12-inch Crescent wrench, water pump plier, 1/2-inch impact, 19mm socket, long nose plier, 19mm wrench, penetrating oil, and some silicone spray. These are the parts I'm going to be using today to do this job: a bellows boot, inner tie rod, and an outer tie rod. Okay, so I'm going to be working on the passenger side front. When I grab the tire, it's supposed to be tight, but in this case it's shaking. Something is loose underneath. So when I went underneath, I checked it out, and the inner tie rod is worn out. So I'm going to be replacing the inner and the outer tie rod. Okay, so I turned the wheel all the way to the right. So this is the inner joint right here. If you see it, it's going in and out. That's worn out. It's supposed to be tight. It shouldn't have any play in it. First, I'm going to be shooting some penetrating oil. So I'm going to be loosening up this lock nut. So I'm going to be removing the cotter pin. Okay, removing the nut. Okay, so I'm going to get my ball joint tie rod separator. And I'm going to be removing the outer tie rod. Since we're not going to be using the outer tie rod, it's okay for me to use this and rip the boot. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to be unscrewing this tie rod end and count how many turns before it comes off. 1, so 14. So when I put back the new inner and outer tie rod, I'm going to have to screw the outer tie rod 14 times. So I'm going to be removing the lock nut, removing this clamp, and removing the bellows boot. So there's a clamp on the inside of the bellows boot. What I have to do is get a pry bar. I'm going to have to break the clamp. So what I just did with my pry bar, I had to pound that clamp to break it off so I can get the boot out. Okay, on this one there's a lock washer, but nobody bent it over to lock the inner tie rod. If it's bent over, then you're gonna have to get the pry bar and pound it and straighten it out before you unscrew the inner tie rod. So in this case, nobody bent over the washer. So I have my tool to remove the inner tie rod. Okay, so now I'm going to be unscrewing it. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to turn the wheel to the left. So I'm going to have to make this inner tie rod go more inside so my tool can actually spin around. So now I can remove my tool. And unscrew the tie rod. So I straightened out the wheel. Now I'm going to be installing my inner tie rod. It comes with this washer with these two tabs. These two tabs, you got to line them up with the rack. And when you tighten up, then what you need to do with this washer, you got to bend it. Just bend it the best you can. That's the lock, so it doesn't unscrew. Okay, so I'm going to be screwing my inner tie rod in. So you got to make sure that washer lines up with the rack. So now I can tighten it up. I'm gonna have to turn my steering a little bit to the left because this piece might hit the frame. So I'm gonna be tightening it up. So now these washers, I gotta bend them to lock the inner tie rod. Just do the best you can. Then with a hammer, just, if you can, just fold it over. Okay, I'm gonna be putting on this new Bellows boot. It came with this clamp, but it's too hard to put this clamp on. So what I'm gonna do is use a plastic tie strap, just as good. So first we're gonna be removing this nut. I'm going to be spraying some silicone lube right on the shaft. Spray some right in the Bellow's boot. Okay, now we can slide it on. And we got to slip it on the rack side. Okay, so I'm going to be putting on my plastic tie strap. So just make it tight and cut off the excess. Okay, so we're going to be putting on this clamp first. Putting the lock nut on. Screwing the outer tie rod 14 times. Okay, that's 14. And then this nut came with the outer tie rod. It doesn't require a cotter pin. This one has a nylon washer, so that what locks the nut in. On this one, you just make it tight. So we're going to be connecting it to the spindle. Putting on the nut and just tighten it up tight. So I'm going to be tightening up the lock nut. Okay. So now make sure you take the vehicle for a wheel alignment. So that's how you replace an inner and outer tie rod and Bellow's boot. If you have any questions, comment below. Make sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I see you in the next video. Aloha.